Welcome to this edition of Simsbury School News. My name is Dominique Avery. With us today is ERIN Murray, the Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Scott Baker, who is the principal of Tariffville School, and Chris LISS, who's a third grade teacher at Tariffville School. ERIN and Chris and Scott are here today to discuss the Common Core standards. We set this topic a couple of a couple of months ago. But just in the last few weeks, the Common Core, news about the Common Core totally exploded when a West Hartford teacher wrote an op-ed in the Hartford Courant saying that Common Core standards were stripping the joy out of teaching and doing nothing to help children. And just before we taped this, Governor Malloy announced that he would create a working group to make changes in the implementation of the Common Core. So everything had been going along very nicely, and then suddenly it all blew up. ERIN, before we get into the controversy, though, there are a lot of people in our audience who know nothing about the Common Core standards, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what they are and where they came from.
Okay. So academic standards have been around for a long time, whether they were in reading, writing, math, science, or social studies. But back prior to 2010, a committee of national governors and chief state school officers and other educators came together to say, we need to look at the data, the performance of our students. And every state had their own standards. Connecticut had standards and different states had standards. So this committee came together and created the Common Core state standards. And on July 7th of 2010, Connecticut adopted these standards in English language arts and in mathematics. And the standards are really what they identify or what students need to know, or the skills that students have to have at every grade level, starting from kindergarten through grade 12 in English language arts and mathematics.
So what does that mean, standards? I mean, that sort of could be gobbledygook. Is it a paragraph? Is it 10 pages? What's in those standards?
For example, a reading standard is citing text evidence. And so we look at, that's an anchor standard that crosses across all grade levels. So what does it look like in kindergarten? What does it look like as they move into third grade, sixth grade, the middle school, and the high school? So when we think about that, you think of the complexity and the skills that students need as they read fiction, nonfiction text, and using evidence to cite their thinking or their what they're going to write about as they read and or write. So it's a progression of skills that take kids through every grade level, which really have worked for us in the sense that we've had standards in Simsbury for quite some time. And so we're fortunate to be able to utilize these standards, the Common Core state standards, to really benchmark where we are and make some decisions on what we needed to maybe think more about, maybe take something out, maybe move some of our skills from a grade level to a different grade level.
Can one of you, Chris or Scott, give me an example of what do you tell parents? What are you telling teachers? How are you? I mean, I still find it sort of mysterious. What are these standards? How do you explain them? It still sounds a little bureaucratic to me. So what do you do to make them real for people?
Sure. So when you talk about standards versus curriculum, I think those are two words that people will sometimes use interchangeably. And as ERIN had said, standards are more about what the skills you want students to be able to do through the grades. So, an example when you think about writing, like a shift that the standards have, caused us to think about. In kindergarten, when we're first introducing writing skills, we've in the past really just focused on narrative and storytelling. And what the Common Core standards have said is that it would, all the way down, we should have students be able to write an opinion and form an opinion about something. And so, the Common Core standards have caused us to look at our writing curriculum all the way down, and we've shifted, into kindergarten and asking kindergarten students to give their opinion on what their favorite season is, or any variety of topics. And so that's a skill that we hadn't been asking 5- and 6-year-olds to do in the past.
Have you really not been asking? You're a third grade teacher. Kids are giving their opinions all the time.
They are, but I think the way that we are asking them to state their opinions and defend their opinions is really one of the shifts that we're seeing. As Erin mentioned, there's definitely a shift with the expectation around nonfiction reading. And you asked that question about how do we inform parents. When we think about our parent nights at the beginning of the year, we let them know they should expect to see more nonfiction reading that's going to come home, and encourage kids to read more and to think more critically about that. So when we think about that opinion piece, we really want kids to have read a couple of text sources and develop an opinion around a topic, and then be able to speak and write to that, and have conversations that support their thinking around that topic.
Okay, so why is this now so controversial? Why has this exploded? Why did this West Hartford teacher saying it's taking the joy out of teaching for her? She, as a matter of fact, said she is ready to quit, and that it's not helping children. That was what she said. What is going on here?
We've all thought a lot about that, I think, and at the building level, being the building principal, I think you see it on the front line when you're talking with teachers, and I honestly don't think that it's just the Common Core. We really have a time of unprecedented change coming from without into school districts. And so, when you look at, okay, the Common Core is causing us to change some of what we're doing in our units. We have a new test looming out there that there are a lot of unknowns about. And then we also have a teacher evaluation system that has come down from the state of Connecticut as well. And so when you put those three things together, it's really uneven ground for teachers. And so, that's the job of a building leader, to be listening to teachers, providing the supports. And we can get more into what types of supports we've,
Okay, so
put into
we'll get
place,
to remind me if I forget.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the teachers in Connecticut are sort of terrified. I heard Governor Malloy make a speech in Washington about all the changes that were happening in Connecticut, and he said, we are asking the teachers to drink out of a fire hose. He was very aware of how much change they were asking for. So, Erin, when you heard yesterday that he has put a brake on, what has he actually done, and what is that going to mean for you and Simsbury?
Well, it's interesting. At this point, we don't quite know, but having a task force to look at the implementation of the Common Core will be something that we'll be very interested in watching and trying to figure out. But taking us back to 2010 in Simsbury and looking at how we unfolded the work around the standards and how we used our foundational curriculum in which to then make decisions down the road, knowing that there was this assessment that was coming in the 14-15 school year, but not knowing what that looked like. So the work that we've been doing around curriculum, around instruction, has been ongoing for 4 years now. And then to take on top of it, as Scott said, the evaluation. So this high stakes teacher evaluation rating that teachers will have, tied to an assessment that we don't know what it looks like from the beginning till the end, is very unnerving and alarming to people. So we've tried to provide those supports to teachers to help them better understand it. So I don't quite know what it means to slow down the implementation of, as Governor Malloy is talking about. We'll be very interested to watch this in the upcoming days to try to figure out what that will look like. I believe what they're saying is the teacher evaluation, because we're not going to have test data to mark teacher progress or student growth until really almost like spring of 2016. So that I can see that slowing down and not using that as a high stakes rating for teachers. But there's been a tremendous amount of work, at least in Simsbury, around benchmarking ourselves against the Common Core state standards. And we've got work to do, but we're in a good place in that sense. But it is a little bit alarming and unnerving for teachers when all of this trifecta, if you will, is in place at one time.
So let's hear from you. What are the teachers saying? You're on the ground floor there.
Absolutely. And I think Erin and Scott both spoke to the point. I think that testing piece, that this unknown of this test that will be coming to us is definitely causing anxiety amongst teachers. And the fact that it is linked to our evaluation certainly is unnerving to people. I think that Simsbury is so fortunate to have incredibly talented and dedicated teachers, and we have had high expectations and been high performers for so long, and we still want that. And so you feel a little uncomfortable in your own skin to really not know what exactly you're working towards as far as that test piece is concerned. And we really want to do the job of making sure that our kids are meeting the standards, as well as being prepared for this very unique and different testing situation. And so that's that other piece that is unsettling to people.
So we're going to discuss the test in more detail, but I wanted to just show the audience a part of a nationally produced 3-minute video on a website called commoncoreworks.org, and so we can take a look and see what they are trying to get across on a national basis.
Like it or not, life is full of measuring sticks. How smart we are, how fast we are, how well we can, compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that. But when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful after graduation, is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as the graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. That's making it too hard to know if our kids are really doing well enough overall, and if they can really compete for a job someday. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. They're like a total sea change in education. Consistent, strong, clear benchmarks for English language arts and math.
So that little public service announcement was all about setting high national standards, and here in Simsbury, as we've already heard, we had high standards. And I'm going to ask a very frank question. Did we really need Common Core standards in Simsbury?
It's an interesting question, and when we talk to teachers, whether we talk it to our elementary teachers, our middle school, or our high school teachers, there's excitement around the standards in the sense of the rigor and the expectations. Not that we didn't have that. Our students perform very well. If you begin to look at our student performance, whether it's on PSAT, SAT, AP performance, our students do incredibly well. But the notion of the writing, the opinion writing, and the narrative writing, and the argumentative writing, all of those kinds of pieces of, it raises the expectations and the rigor, and it hopefully provides somewhat of a level playing field for all kids, that the expectations are there for all kids to meet those expectations by the end of each grade level.
And two other pieces that we've talked about. Number one being that when we look at the Common Core standards and examine them closely, the English language arts skills and the mathematics skills being spread across other disciplines into science and social studies, and that it is a collective effort, and it is important to be able to communicate in a social studies class, and we do need to pay attention to how those standards are being carried forward in there. And then the second piece being the piece that excites us is we get new students in all the time. And that's a challenge when you have a student coming from Kentucky or Arizona, or Bridgeport or Avon, just a little ways away, and you've got students who know how to do things a little differently from town to town, and that puts them at a disadvantage.
That's what the video says, and you said you were actually using that video in presentations.
Correct. Yeah.
To make that point.
Right. So when you talk about students who are moving, this could really benefit them, I think, greatly.
It's a pretty big country, and the standards are very different.
I think one of the pieces that Scott alluded to is this literacy across the content areas, and that it not only rests on the reading or the English teachers, but looking at literacy, whether it's in social studies or science, and some of the supports that we've put in place for our teachers at the secondary level and again at the elementary level, whether they're language arts consultants or literacy coaches. I was in a meeting with social studies teachers the other day, and they were excited about the fact that they had a literacy expert that was helping them plan They were modeling, coaching in the classroom, and helping them better understand what close reading is about, or how to cite text evidence, or how to write an argumentative piece in the 11th grade in the way, and hold them accountable for the kinds of skills that the English teachers are teaching them. So we're trying to put those supports in place and ensure that these skills are cutting across all content areas, and not only science and social studies, but the technical areas as
Right.
well.
One of the things that the teacher's op-ed piece that went viral nationwide talked about was sort of killing the initiative of the teacher. And when I read that, I thought back to my own teaching career, which was a very long time ago, and I was trained at Bank Street in a progressive way, where we were taught to take what comes from the classroom and make something of it and build a unit, a year around it. And in my classroom, that happened to be about whales. I was teaching in New Haven. I had a Yale professor come, and he read something from Moby Dick. And I don't know why I invited him. Melville was his thesis subject. I invited him. He came. The kids were fascinated, and we ran with that. And we had this entire year study about whales. We went to Mystic. We learned all about the ships. We had spelling words. We found original literature. We did all of that. It was an amazing creative year. Okay, would that be able to happen to a teacher in this, in our modern day with Common Core standards?
I think it would be incredibly overwhelming to take on a unit like that, or the way that we used to do thematic units, even that weren't unit-based, with these new set of standards, because we do need to make sure that we are covering all these standards and that we are giving our kids the tools they need as readers, as writers, and through mathematics. And while we love the creativity that we may have had with some of those units to truly ensure that our kids are getting the standards that they need, there are some shifts. And fortunately, with the units that we have in place, we feel comfortable through curricular teamwork and through the leadership that we have in the district to make sure that those standards are being met and that those are embedded into our unit work. But we still have the opportunity to choose texts, for example, that we love and that inspire us as teachers and therefore inspire our students to think critically and to really enjoy and think about life in big ways and small ways. So we still look for and have those opportunities, but it's going to look and feel a little different, definitely, than some of those units that may have been done that way in the past.
Scott, do you ever worry about that? Does it kill creativity?
I don't think so. I think, between even, in my career as a teacher, I've, seen that shift a little bit from, deciding, looking at the year and deciding just what you want to do. I think in Simsbury, what we have had for a number of years is it's an edu-speak, but a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And we want to be able to let our community know that whether you go to Tariffville School or Tooten Hills or Squadron Line, there are certain experiences that your children are going to have that are going to prepare them for success at Henry James. That it doesn't matter which zip code you have in Simsbury, but you're going to be prepared. And if you had a fully open approach like that, where every teacher could just plan the year, I don't think you could guarantee that.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, in retrospect, I looked back at that year and thought it was an amazing year for those kids, but did they actually learn enough at every level to go to the next grade? And now, in retrospect, I wonder, and I think perhaps they didn't.
So on the flip side of it, what I try to do as a principal is give teachers license and freedom to find those places where you can embed yourself into the learning. You take a nonfiction unit and have them, something happens with a volcanic eruption or something, and allow them to be able to run with that because kids are really into it. Or, in a science unit, there might be something on shadows, and you could do the little reading, and there's a website, or you can go outside and start drawing with chalk. So there are opportunities to do that. I think it's just it's a different age than it was.
And I think that we're all very aware of the fact that, especially at the elementary level, we're dealing with kids. And we need our kids to be engaged in the learning. We need our kids to enjoy the learning. And we need to enjoy the teaching, which is what brought us all into the classroom in the first place. So it's wonderful that we have Scott's support, and people know that we need to provide opportunities to have the creativity and the fun that goes along with this and supports the learning and the standards that we're doing.
Okay, so I'm now convinced that, at least here, we are not killing either the children's engagement and learning or teachers' creativity. But something else is going on, and that is testing.
Right.
And this testing is very different. And maybe we should talk a little bit about the testing because it involves teachers, children, and parents' anxiety. So who wants to run with that first? What is the testing that's going on?
So
going
the
to
Smarter
happen?
Balanced Assessment test is one that we will do a pilot
Say
this
that
spring.
again. Smarter
Balanced
Balanced
Assessment. There are 2 testing consortiums that are working to support the Common Core State Standards. There's PARC, which I'm not quite sure what the
not sure the
PARC.
acronym.
I'm not sure what that means, but we're not part of that. We're part of the Smarter Balance. We call it SBAC. And it's a technology-based. Will be computer adaptive. It is.
What does that mean?
It means that there will be various levels of difficulty of questions within the grade level of a student. So if a 3rd grade student is on the assessment, there'll be some easy questions, there'll be some moderately middle of the road questions, and there'll be some difficult. So depending on how the student answers the questions, the level of difficulty will rise to give us an indicator what that will look like. We don't
Is this
know.
a pen and pencil test, or do they take?
It's all on the computer.
That's very different.
Which is very different. And back in November, we asked all of our teachers at our professional development day to go on and take a practice test, either take the English language arts or take the mathematics, so that they could see the kinds of experiences that kids would be having on the computer. There's a lot of various tools that kids need to be familiar with. So we're spending time and monies in which to make sure that we have the technology available, ready for students come in just a few weeks when we test all students in grades 3 through 8 and in grade 11.
Is this replacing the other tests that have been given?
It is. It's replacing the Connecticut Mastery Test in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10, but our Science CMT and CAPT CMT will remain in place for a number of years at this point right now, because as we've talked about, the standards focus on English language arts and mathematics.
And just to add on this, I think this is not the first time our kids have taken computer-based tests. Students who have IEPs who need modifications to the Connecticut Mastery Test, for a number of years now, at least probably 5, they have been taking their mastery test on the computer. So it had embedded tools in there where it could read the questions to them and they would type the responses in. So,
but a small number of
small
students.
number of students,
Right.
but so some of them have taken tests on the computer, and we've been able to, watch that, and we're trying to reflect back on those students' experiences, and then how do we generalize that to the whole.
It's difficult for us to have a real full picture of what the assessment's going to look like, because we've not seen the computer adaptive model of it, where we can try ourselves out and see how far we can get and have it back up or move forward for us. We haven't seen that part of it, nor will it be computer adaptive this spring. So that part of it is difficult, but also helping kids better understand how split screens work and various tools, and our 3rd graders, the keyboarding skills that they'll need, and 4th graders, the keyboarding skills. So we're working and trying to find ways to mimic these experiences for kids within our curriculum, but it's a challenge, and the expectations are high. What we don't want to do is we want to make sure that we're assessing students for their knowledge and skill versus how they can manipulate the computer.
So
That's the piece we worry
This is
about.
in March that they're
Correct.
taking this. So when the students in Simsbury come to take the test, are they taking it on these Chrome computers?
They will be.
Yes.
So I have read that some New York parents are freaking out about the results, about the testing, about all of this. How are you handling that?
Well, so this is a pilot year. We're not getting results back,
Right.
so we're not assessing the students on what they're doing here. So this is a chance for us to take a look, and so, we will be watching over the shoulders of our children, and seeing what it looks like and how do they respond to the test, and learning from that. I mean, that's the whole idea of having a pilot year.
And New York did use the other park. They use the other testing consortium. But still, it's testing the Common Core standards, the same standards.
Scott, you've been talking to a lot of parents. This will air way after this meeting
Right.
happens. You're meeting a group of parents tonight. What are you telling them to reassure them? And Chris, what are 2 questions? How are you dealing with this with children to make them calm and not freak out?
Sure. So, obviously we're having an evening tonight with parents, and, we're just trying to share all of the information we have. As part of tonight's workshop, I'm going to have all of the Chromebooks that we have out on the tables, and at the end of our workshop, I'm going to have parents log in and actually look at the questions on the practice test and see what it's going to be like for their students, because I feel the more they know, the less mystery there is, then the richer dialogue we can have about it. But my message to parents is that we have really, really hardworking and bright students, and that this is a part of what we do at Tariffville School, this testing, and there's a whole other side of what we do to teach our kids on a social and emotional side, and how to be good citizens and good friends, and we're not going to lose sight of that in light of all of this. And when you sit down and talk with parents about that and put things in perspective, I think that's helps the overall mission of what we do.
Now, do you expect that as a result of the current controversy that we're reading about, that parents are going to be more anxious tonight? I know this is going to air after this meeting, but
Right.
than they have been before.
Well, I'm wondering if we have a big enough room. But, we're in this together, and that's always been our attitude at, wherever I've been in Simsbury. Our attitude is that we're in this together. We have such a strong partnership between our schools and our families that I don't think I've experienced even one time where a parent is coming, angry and demanding to know something. It's more of a conversation that we're having about either their child or the greater good of our school community.
How about with the children?
And we just want to reassure the kids, always going into a testing situation, for them to put their very best into it. One of the beauties is that we're talking about using technology, and kids love to get in front of a computer or a Chromebook. So they're actually motivated to get on and do the things that we're asking them to do at this point. We certainly have them in front of either a laptop or a Chromebook more often than we have in the past. So 3 times a week they're working on keyboarding skills. We are working to embed what we call split screen work into our core or content areas. So with social studies work and with science, where they might do some nonfiction research on one side and type some main ideas on another, just so they get a feel for how they might manipulate and see information presented to them when the test comes.
Okay, we have just about run out of time. There's so much that we didn't get to. ERIN and Scott, if you could just quickly sum up in just a few words, you had your last word. What is the most important thing you want the people of Simsbury to understand about what Common Core is about and how we're handling it?
I think the important piece as a district perspective, that we are being very thoughtful. We are putting vision forward on how we want to implement the Common Core. We've been doing it now for 4 years. We'll continue to do that. We have very smart kids, and we want our students to be college and career ready, which we know they will be by the time they start from kindergarten and exit in 12th grade.
Scott, less than 30 seconds.
Less than 30 seconds. So, obviously you led with that this has just captured the national attention. And to echo what ERIN said, we have been very proactive with this, and we have a really talented team of people behind ERIN who have been working on the Common Core implementation and folding it into our units since 2010. I'm very proud to say that we, as a result of the Common Core, have not had to change a single program,
Very important.
math program, language arts program, at the elementary level. And our partnership with Teachers College and our math program of investigations has been able to adapt to the standards quite nicely. And so that's one thing our teachers aren't having to face down, is a whole new program somewhere. So.
I can see that I'm going to have you all back again, because there's a lot more to talk about. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dominique Avery.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.